Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Hello and welcome to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studio inside Max 6 and the Conscious Capitalism of Arizona headquarters in Tempe, Arizona. And I am very much looking forward to our conversation today. We've been talking about this segment for a while, haven't we, Ryan?
Yes, we have, Karen.
Yes. So I said Ryan, like you're all supposed to know who that is. Welcome back to the studio, please. Ryan Parker, he is our guest co-host today, and he's the creative director and owner with Xpleo Media. Welcome back.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for having me back.
I'm thrilled to have you back. We mentioned that we had you here with, let's see, Jeff Orr, and you and I had a conversation not too long ago, and then Tisha Pelletier and the gal from Dave & Buster's.
Correct. Vanessa.
Yeah, Vanessa was with us as well. And then you have been so great about sending me some really great referrals and saying to me, you need to meet some of these professionals. And I said, well, come back and co-host these segments with me.
I appreciate it, Karen.
Yeah. So today we're going to shine the spotlight on photography, and specifically Jonathan Puente. And he is a photographer here in the Valley, and his company is Jonathan Puente Photography. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Is it Jonathan? Do you go by John?
Jonathan works fine.
Yeah? Any other nicknames besides?
Family and friends will call me Johnny.
Yeah, well, I'm sticking with Jonathan until I'm family and friend.
Okay.
Maybe by the end of the segment. So you've been, my gosh, a lifelong photographer, really.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how you got started. When was that light bulb moment, if you had one?
Really, it was just kind of exploring with film photography when I was younger, just kind of artistic stuff. I mean, I was living out in the desert in Tucson and just kind of like playing with a lot of just really creative stuff. I didn't really know what I was doing a lot of the time. But I just had this like itch to go out and just shoot a bunch of things and kind of see what I could get in camera. It's just like a fun explorative process for me. So that kind of jump-started things probably in my early teens. And then it took some time where I was like, went back and forth with different jobs, different experiences in life. And I was like, okay, why am I not coming back around to what I love to do?
Right. I had a massage this morning. I'm having some shoulder and back issues, and I had a massage this morning, and the gal said this is a second career for her, but she's always loved being in touch with people, doing that sort of thing. And she kept saying to herself over the years, why am I not just building a business around what I love? And so this is kind of similar for you.
Very much so. I mean, I've kind of gone through trial and error. I have a journalism degree from University of Arizona. Didn't really go that route with my careers in life. I did some other customer service, like sales, big corporate jobs and stuff like that. I mean, well-known companies, but they'll always say go for that stable job and income. That's kind of like the push I got from like certain family and friends.
Sure.
And especially in like when I graduated 2007 and the different coming on the market crashes and stuff like that, it was very much focused on being an entrepreneur was kind of a very scary thing to do, depending on the market you're in.
Yeah.
And even with the good market, it still is scary.
It is.
True. Very true.
But you're here, and you've been doing it for how long then under your own?
A little over 10 years now.
Yeah. And so you talked a little bit about your early interest in just exploring and taking pictures of things.
Yeah.
But now you're really kind of focused on branding, photography, and small business owners and entrepreneurs. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So it kind of ties into my previous entrepreneurial experience because when I was actually, my first job was 14, I was sealing asphalt driveways. And this is, even
Not
the
seeing
summertime.
the tie, but I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Yeah, it was definitely some physical labor to say the least. And I would just walk away with just tar and emulsion all over me and stuff. Yeah. And just, I was like, this is too much. But that was like my first job at 14, was like having a business with my brothers. Then in college, I went into doing like landscaping work. And so I always had that entrepreneurial itch. And so even though I started working for other companies and things, as I came into photography, I was like, how can I do this a little differently? Like there's so many photographers, such a saturated market.
Yes.
Now you've got everyone and their mom has a camera now, and nice cameras are pretty inexpensive. So it's kind of like, how do you separate yourself out from everyone else? And there's influencers or social media people, and it's like there's so much going on right now. And so I started looking at businesses and their brands and their pages and saying, okay, how can I provide certain packages and things that's kind of more in their ballpark as a business, but provide a lot of interesting content specifically focused on their brand direction. And so that's been getting a lot of traction lately.
Okay, so up until now, I was thinking like headshots and professional shots, but you're talking about working with business owners to help find their niche through the images that they share through social media and on their websites.
And where Jonathan's super strong is creating that visual storytelling.
Yes.
So it becomes not a once-in-time image. it ends up becoming the springboard for multiple images that represent the voice for the brand. And that's where Jonathan is super strong, is developing that. So it's not, I'm coming in to take a picture, I'm coming in to develop part of your story. It becomes a whole new avenue for that business to communicate to their audience that they usually haven't thought about previously.
Yeah, I think that's very on point. I mean, a lot of businesses, the first thing they'll do is they'll take shortcuts with their images.
Well, we think, to your point, we think we're all photographers with our phones.
Yeah. It's photographer, F-A-U-X.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I mean, let's face it. I mean, even certain apps and phones, you can get some pretty dang good images on there. So, I mean, there was actually one thing I saw on Instagram. It was like, forget the camera, forget Photoshop. Here's the app you need to download for your iPhone. I saw that, and I was like, no, this is not happening. No. Because, I mean, yeah, they take some great quality images sometimes, but it's just not the same. Yeah. I see so many businesses, they want to amp up their social media. They need more content. So like what we do on the fly, but they're always cutting corners with investing into their content.
And it's incongruent. To Ryan's point, you really are helping them share their story, their vision, their purpose through not only storytelling, through imagery, but also through where they're headed.
It's interesting because a big part of being able to utilize Jonathan to the max is understanding, first off, the voice for your business in your organization, because that will guide Jonathan into a successful campaign of putting that voice into visual representation. Then it's coming up with a content strategy around what Jonathan does so that it dials in that it's not a one and done. You are now building a story. And then it comes down to the metrics, which is then on the business's side, is to make sure that they're following up and watching what's happening in that interaction.
And then tweaking if necessary,
correct.
Right.
Yeah, and the tweak might be in the imagery, but it might also be in the words chosen and the stories told, or it might be a combination, or you might say, hey, this is it, and we keep doing more of this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And other brands are easier to work with than others. I mean, some people have a very specific direction where they want to go in. Other brands have no idea. So I'll guide them as best I can with visual content. There might be some circumstances where I have preferred partners and people that I work with who do specific content curating because they have the social media management or influencer experience. So I'll bring in friends like that who have a good reputation as far as the work they do, and then kind of tag team on different stuff together and content.
It's interesting because Jonathan works with a wine company that they bottle their own wine. And I follow, obviously, Jonathan on Instagram. And it's really neat because you can tell that through his imagery, the wine is a very nice wine. But the way he's positioned it, it's approachable. So it doesn't look pretentious. So it's kind of, you get that nice flair of like, I want to try this, but it's not, you see it to where you're like, it's not a wine I can have unless I'm having a
special occasion.
It's very much kind of a very luxury looking brand, but kind of an everybody's wine. And so it's really neat how he represents that through the photography, because it does do the speaking for the brand.
And so aside from following him on Instagram, how did you two connect? Is it really just that?
It's a mutual connect. Peter Garfield was the one who originally invited me to. It was like, you got to meet Ryan, like very character-driven guy. And Peter's a guy who very much likes to connect people in the Valley who he knows has a good reputation, has that relational-based mentality.
Yay.
And that's the thing I've been gravitating toward with my business, is getting away from the transactional approach to people and just saying,
you're in the right place. That's what we do here. Yeah, I love hearing that. So shout out to Peter and to thank him for the introduction.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he's a great guy. And I'm finding the more that you kind of open yourself up of like, okay, we all get stuck in that rut of like, how can we grow a business, or finances are tight. So you kind of get in that transactional mode for a second, and then things it doesn't really help. And so when you take a step back and you're like, okay, I need to recreate my own brand for a second, and then build those relationships, take time for it, just be patient. Things will come back into things. But yeah, then you start attracting more people in that whole relational focus in business.
Yeah.
And I've known a lot of photographers. I've been doing marketing for well over 13 years now. Most photographers look at it as a project. Like, I'm coming in to do a project, where Jonathan works as a collaborator. So he's coming in from a different perspective of, it's not just, I've got to get the shots and I'm out of here. He's looking as, how do I design this so that it has some future potential, not only with the customer, but with the partners he's working with. So it's not specific to just his job. He's looking at it from the standpoint of, how does it relate to everybody, which is very unique because most photographers go in, they're like, oh, I got to set up some strobes. I got to make sure that, the lighting's right. Pop, pop, pop. I'm out,
Right.
And
no attachment to how they're utilizing the product.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've had the honor of working with Jonathan on projects together. So we've collaborated together. So it's really neat to watch his mindset and to see his thought process behind not just the imagery, but then how does it translate into future opportunity for that customer, and where can they leverage that beyond just the project that's at hand right then?
Right. I think a lot of photographers don't focus on the business aspect of the clients they're working with. They don't look at it from an entrepreneurial standpoint or from a business standpoint of how the content ties into everyone involved. And it's like, as a photographer, it's like you're affecting the marketing for that company and their advertising, their brand image in general. And so you got to take that very seriously. So that's why you got to take the time to get to know them and to get to research their brand a little bit. And I prefer one-on-one meetings with potential clients. It's definitely more relational that way. I get a lot more from them about their business and how they got into it. You get a more personal vibe from it, and then that affects the visual content you create from it. So it's really cool to get to know a lot of business owners in that way too.
As you're sharing that, I'm thinking about some of our big box brand and our enterprises that have, hundreds of thousands of dollars to put into their marketing and their branding campaigns. And we see that through the imagery and through the stories that they tell. And a lot of us as small business owners are kind of like, oh gosh, that just makes sense, right? I clearly know who they are. And then when we dial it back down to your point earlier, we don't always have the budget, especially when we're just starting out, to be able to hire some big agency. That's what makes this kind of conversation and the work that you guys do so appealing, because you can help people get there.
And it's interesting because I'm working with a new brand. I introduced you to Donna Jewett. We're starting a new brand called Truist Law for her. She has a very successful family law practice, and now she's moving into estate and trust planning. One of the big things that I told Donna is when we get going with your marketing, the goal is to introduce visual imagery into the brand. It may not be the first thing that you do because obviously you have to get budget. But the biggest thing is for every dollar that you bring in, you need to set aside a marketing budget from that dollar. Yeah. And you have to look at it as an investment. It's not an expense. And the other part of it is if you're doing it without a structure, and that's the hard part, is most people say, oh, it's photography, I could just do it with my phone. If you don't have that voice, that strategy, and that metric tied to that medium of marketing, you're not going to be successful because you're going to do it for 2 or 3 times and then you're going to stop. And the whole goal is it's an investment. You don't go buy a stock today and say, if it doesn't make money tomorrow, I'm selling it, right? You buy it for a purpose of what that future value will be. Same thing with your marketing dollars. And that's where a lot of small businesses fail, is they don't look at Jonathan as an investment. They look at it as, oh, it's an expense. You got to look at someone like Jonathan as an investment to build that awareness of my brand through this new medium, not new, but a lot of people don't understand it, of visual storytelling.
Yeah. I'm going to make a comment about our headsets. It's not impacting our microphone. I know it kind of pops in and out, so I apologize.
For hearing what's going on.
For the three of us. So no one else will hear it, but just so the three of us are clear, it's not impacting how this is coming in, not only live, but as a podcast. So branding, what you're sharing is really important. And the piece that there's this idea that we have to put our best foot forward in what we're doing out there on social media and our website, and not always sure which direction to go, because at least in my case, I get bombarded daily by LinkedIn, Facebook,
I
email.
saw your post the other day about that.
I did, and I'm learning, and I can always partner with and collaborate and hire additional people to help me grow my team. But how do you break through all that noise? You had said it earlier, Jonathan. It's saturated, the market of digital media and even photography, professional photography. Do either of you have some suggestions for our listeners as to when we're looking for a professional photographer, what are some of the things we ought to be considering?
I mean, one of the first things that's really kind of taking a step back, a lot of people, you want to look at other business models and what companies are doing, but I think a lot of people, they get in this mode, especially like new businesses, entrepreneurs, like this kind of comparison mode of like, okay, other people are doing X, Y, and Z, and I should be trying these exact things. And they get kind of stuck in this thing of just trying to basically copy other people are doing. And it's like, okay, then you're stepping away from the uniqueness of your brand and your identity and what you're trying to portray through your brand. And this is the same struggle I have with photography. I mean, as an artist, I talk to so many photographers and other artists who are just like, man, this person's doing this. You see stuff in social media. It becomes a bit overwhelming at times. And you have to really take a step back because it gets to that point you're like, okay, what direction am I going? How do I want to be more creative with my brand, with my imaging? So yeah, I think people just kind of need to take a moment to kind of reassess how they want their company to go. And if it's becoming stressful, if it's anxiety driven, you're not enjoying the process of your business, what can you take, what can you change? What can you reapproach?
And I know the word's way overplayed in the entrepreneurial culture today, but I really do think it's about authenticity. But I think it's about, that's why the voice part is so important in a brand. And I know Simon Sinek also is very much overplayed now, but I think it does come down to finding out your core beliefs, your core why, and then being able to communicate that to those folks that are assisting you in building your marketing. If you come to any one of us, Jonathan, myself, even when you were, doing your leadership, business and things like that, if someone came to you with a very generic story, it's very hard to define a good, solid communication strategy to move them in a direction that's going to benefit their business. I'd rather find out their why versus what service they offer.
Because that becomes the foundation, doesn't it,
Correct.
for what they're offering and how unique they are.
And that's one of the conversations that we typically have when we engage customers. I know Jonathan and I both do it. We go in and we say, that's great that you're telling us that you do X, Y, and Z service. Why? What's your passion? What drives you in that? What really gets you up in the morning? Because a big part of where I see a lot of businesses, especially small businesses, failing is they have to always look perfect. They have to be 120% on 120% of the time. I think in reality, people want to see transparency. They want to know who you are, and that imagery needs to represent you. I'm a button-up and jeans and boots wearing guy. And so for me, that's part of my brand. And people know that. I'm not showing up in a three-piece suit to a meeting. If you don't like that side of me, I'm probably not a good fit for you. And there are certain businesses I've gone and spoken with, and they're like, well, we want that look. And I'm like, well, that look doesn't get these results. I can wear that look, but it's not who I am. And so I think that's where, as a business owner, we need to think through what's that for us? What's our why? And then how are we going to communicate that? Because through visual mediums such as photography and video, you can do that sometimes better than you can with the written word.
Right. That's definitely true. I mean, I agree. And like I said earlier, I mean, people take a lot of shortcuts when it comes to the visual branding because they're like, okay, I just need to fit this format. But a lot of people don't get to know other entrepreneurs in the Valley too. So I think it's been big for me. It's taking the time to ask for help or ask people hey, what are you going through with your business? In that kind of candid moment, it's becoming a big thing even on social media where people are not liking the whole stage pose type of branding and marketing. They want to see more authenticity. They want to see more raw things, more behind the scene things. But to Ryan's point, people want things to be perfect from the get-go. And it's just you got to be patient with it. You got to make sure that you take the time that the foundation is set. And that's your visual content, it's your mission, what got you excited to start that business to begin with.
Is it fair to say that, depending on some brands, that vulnerability is as important as authenticity? And what I mean by that is, we mentioned authenticity, but if a business owner, again, I think it depends on what it is going through a challenge, I believe it's okay to speak to that. Not every brand, right? I don't know that I'd want my attorney sharing about the woes of where they're at with their clientele or financial situation or whatever. But can you, either of you, speak to that a little bit? The vulnerability piece.
I find it as, I hate this word, teachable moments. Because I think in reality, if you put it in a framework, whether it's for a partner that you're speaking to, whether it be to the customer you're speaking to, but it's, here's what I'm learning and you can benefit from what I'm learning. I think that's a way. It can't be a venting process.
Correct.
And it's interesting because if you look at like my blogs, I blog a little bit differently than a lot of people do. Most people in marketing are like the 5 ways to SEO up your website. I'm the polar opposite of that. I'm more about character, leadership, integrity, the things that to me make the core of a business where a brand is really developed around. So most of my blogs start with a recap of a conversation I've had with somebody. It's less these 7 things you have to do. Mine's more of like, this is what I learned, because as much as I'd love to think I know everything, trust me, I know a very smidgen of what there is to be known, even in marketing. And so I'm constantly learning new things. But I try to put it out to the world as something that could benefit them versus it being a look at me thing.
And even if you don't have all the answers yet, too. Yeah. I think that like, here's the conversation I just had, here's what I'm discovering, and here's what I'm still curious about.
Right.
That tells me you're human.
Yeah.
You and your organization are human. And I want to be in relationship and do business with people, to Jonathan's point earlier, that are conscientious, that want to build relationship and make those introductions that make a difference.
I mean, I think if someone says they act like they have all the answers, stay away from that person. Like, that they're going to be trying to force a mentality on you that maybe it's working for them, but even that kind of what they're portraying and saying the stuff they are, like, I don't always believe it. I'm just like, okay, there's something else going on. Like, so to your point, having that authenticity, having like, okay, we're all going through challenges. And that's the thing that's interesting is as I'm doing this more relational approach with people, friends and potential clients and other entrepreneurs in the Valley, there's always this kind of opening up in almost most conversations I have now. Everyone's going through some form of growth in their business through challenges, and they want to hear what other people are going through. I think the other thing is a lot of people get in this competitive mentality. Like, I did it myself for a moment where I was just like, the photographers, I learned a certain level of studio photography from my mentor who had worked with famous photographers, other people in the past in LA and New York. And so a lot of other styles I saw in the Valley was just this very plain, very same thing across the board type mentality. And I was like, I don't want people to learn some of my skill sets to keep myself competitive. But then over time, I just let go of that. I was like, I can actually build relationships with other photographers. I can learn from them and they can learn from me. And you never know who you can partner with.
I agree.
And a big part of that authenticity is knowing what you're good at, what you're average at, and what you're not good at, and being able to communicate that to whomever you're speaking with and be able to be confident and leveraging that skill set and saying, this is what I'm really good at. I've got a new client that I'm going to be meeting with coming up, and they were like, hey, we just need a logo. And I'm like, okay, I can do a logo for you. But at the end of the day, that doesn't really get me all hopped up. I'm like, tell me what you really need. And we started talking through it, and the lady's like, hey, we might be shopping and bidding this out. And I'm like, that's fine. I don't care. You could bid me against 20 graphic designers. What it came to find out is they really need marketing strategy. But that's what gets me up in the morning.
Right.
So I'm like, you know what? I don't care if I get the logo design.
Yeah.
What I'd rather do is work on the strategy with you. Let's pick a designer that actually works, the one that is going to work well for what you want. And then let's actually put the right strategy so we're getting the right branding that we want. I don't have to be the guy that does it, but let's talk about what that looks like from more of a consultative approach, because that's really where my strong suit is. And so I know I'm not the greatest graphic designer. I don't profess to be. There's always going to be someone better than me.
But, right.
Exactly. So why would I play that up as my strength when that's not what I'm truly 120% passionate about? I love it. I love doing it, but it's not the thing that gets me up in the morning. It gets me my blood pumping. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, important in any business as an entrepreneur, is to know this is what really drives me. I'm going to double down on that, not all these ancillary things that are kind of out there.
And be honest about it. To your point, if you had you been hungry for just the paycheck and the job, you might have taken that logo and just done that and not probed and said, this is really who I am.
Yeah.
And we miss those opportunities. So, I'm hearing a lot here. I'm hearing relationship versus transactional. I'm hearing collaborative partners. I'm hearing being authentic.
Well, to your point, I mean, also, I've worked with different people who do social media marketing in the Valley. And working with monthly retainer clients, which is a new direction I've gone in photography. I don't see a lot of photographers doing that out there.
Tell us what that is.
So essentially, I talk with the brand. I see what their direction is. Let's say it's a restaurant. I kind of look at the whole atmosphere of the restaurant, see if the menu item shots, any lifestyle shots, and just kind of tie in a theme based on what I see from their brand. And then what I can do is I do a package monthly. It starts at $500 to give them a month's worth of content. But I bring my studio lighting with me. I take time to see what direction to go in their business. I don't do as much of the consultative stuff, but to both your point, and that's one thing that a lot of businesses don't do enough. They don't reach out to say, hey, we need that help with how to develop from here, what the next steps are to take. So with the social media package, okay, you have the content now. Now there's this person I know who does social media management, social media marketing, or they do influencer work. So it ties everything together. And it's also neat because then it ties in partnerships together too with other professionals in the Valley that you trust. And then it's just kind of like a whole experience for the customer. And I know that most people I've talked to in the Valley that have dealt with bigger digital marketing firms or PR firms, they feel like they've spent thousands of dollars.
Because it was all under one house, but they didn't necessarily get what they wanted. Yeah,
they get like little to no return on investment.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's cool working with individual freelancers or other small business owners in the Valley, because I know this person by their quality of their work and their character. So I can provide one service, say, hey, now that you have this, you should go talk to X, Y, and Z if you need a business consultation or, whatever other direction you need or help you need with your business.
Yeah,
so it's kind
makes
of neat
sense. That way. What is the biggest obstacle for business owners when it comes time for a rebrand? Is that such a thing, a rebrand?
I mean, I've done it several times.
Yourself. Yeah, so have I.
Most entrepreneurs I've talked to have had to do it.
Is there something that either of you might think of that it's the biggest struggle or the biggest challenge for businesses as they get ready to do that?
It depends on what's causing the rebrand, whether it be positive momentum, in other words, our business is in growth phase, or it's in a heading off or stemming off something that was a negative in the business and it's reinventing because of a negative influence. So there is no real one way to look at what that could be.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, it all comes down to story. Inside of that rebrand, it's how does the story shape from here moving forward?
How do we stand in that shift?
Correct. And how do we own it? How do we communicate it? And then how do we live through it and then leverage it for the future of our organization? Because even if it's a negative, we have to be able to reposition it to be of benefit to us in some form or fashion. And so it's funny because a lot of people are like, oh, I just want a new logo because I need to rebrand. Why? Mm-hmm. Like, if it's working, why? Is it just because all of a sudden you woke up and you decided, I don't like the font of my logo? And most folks, especially in the small business world, they forget that the brand is typically themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the interaction with the customer. It's how you answer the phone. It's way more than just the mark that you have on your business card.
I think the rebranding also stems a lot from like the question you said earlier, the why you're doing your business. A lot of people they have kind of this image inside of like what their business is going to look like, the amount of money they're going to make, all the different perks from it. Dive into it. Not so much right away. And so I think a lot of times the rebranding is just that kind of awareness moment of like, okay, why did I start this? Am I going the direction I'm doing it? Am I enjoying what I'm doing still? And if not, then I think that's a key rebranding moment.
And I think a lot of times it's not rebranding, it's pivoting your marketing strategy. Mm-hmm. It becomes now finding the real you inside of it or the real what that organization represents and starting to tap into that. Versus having to start from scratch and try to build something new. You already have a foundation. You're not going to it's kind of like, I look at it this way. You can tear an entire house down to the foundation and the city's going to say it's a new build, right? Or you can leave up one wall and now it's a remodel, right?
Yeah.
Which is a more cost-effective mode to go down to get what your result is. I'd rather do the remodel and take all the positives of the things we have. We have a good slab. We have the right location. We're on the right property. But why do we have to make it more cumbersome for ourselves? So I'd rather take the remodel approach and say, let's leverage all the things we have and move forward with that. So it's building or adding on to your story versus starting from scratch and trying to rebuild.
And so for the onlookers, let's just use that metaphor, and the onlookers passing by, the guy walking the dog down the street every day he passes your brick and mortar, or people driving by, they'll see, oh, there's some new commotion going on there, and there's still some foundation, so they might see the consistency in what you're doing in a slight pivot or maybe a big pivot. But we don't always have to make this huge announcement for a rebrand, do we? Because if it's subtle and it's just a pivot or shift, people who are already following us and fans and and current customers, they're going to come with us anyway. I think sometimes, I guess what I'm getting at, I feel like sometimes people make this big announcement with this, new logo, or they're going to say we're rebranding, and nothing really has changed, and we feel that.
Well,
Go ahead,
Jonathan.
Well, I was going to say, a lot of people say when you have an idea, when you have whether it's rebranding or just a new strategy and using your life or a new direction in your business, or maybe it's a whole massive idea that you have, like, man, this is a game changer. Honestly, people say don't talk about things until you've actually started the journey to get things in motion. Because, people will put it out there and you kind of psych it up and then you psych yourself down.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because I think a lot of what happens in business with rebrand starts with the culture of the business. I think what to your point, Karen, is they've rebranded in image, but they haven't rebranded in internal culture. Yeah. And so what happens is leadership is leading the way of that's going to fix this versus looking internally. This gets into the whole leadership concept conversation you and Jeff and I had. Mm-hmm. It changes the dynamic because that's not a branding or a marketing issue. That's a cultural issue. It's interesting. I was actually thinking about this podcast when I was out the other day. So I was at Target with my wife and my daughter, and I'm walking around and I'm in the guys section, right? And they have those shirts that are like, the Deadpool shirt, the Spider-Man shirt, the Star Wars shirt, right? All these different shirts in this thing. And I look down, I'm like, holy criminy, there's a Blockbuster t-shirt. Not money. You know Blockbuster probably. Yeah. It was probably on the way out when you were probably in your teens,
I went
right?
there all the time.
Okay. So it's crazy because I'm like, Blockbuster's still around. They've shifted their entire model now to being the business that didn't make it, but they're the face of the 80s. Oh, and so it's interesting. Cool. Now they're heading in a different direction where they're not really so much worried about their product. They're making themselves the product. And if you watch the movie Captain Marvel, she crashes into a Blockbuster. Yes. And I was like, that's weird that Blockbuster's there. Well, Blockbuster was setting themselves up now to build this new brand, which is not video. It's them being the face of something that didn't survive the 80s, but is very much 80s and 90s relatable.
So, okay, I'm blown away. So we all know Blockbuster.
Right.
But so there's no product or business anymore other than selling themselves as.
That's what it's looking like.
Wow.
And so you're starting to see them tying to all these 80s and 90s, time periods.
Nostalgic
and
things.
I have a feeling that's what's going to happen is you're going to see that brand evolve to be that throwback brand. Now, what they do with it from there, I don't know. But that speaks to us as entrepreneurs. How can we reinvent ourselves in a new sense and maybe be able to offer new things, but without having to totally destroy what we've already created to do that?
So we continue to be relevant.
Right. And that goes to what this whole conversation is about, is how are you using that visual storytelling in your business if you're not? Because that's that extra piece, that extra bonus that you could be leveraging to help bring a new look into your business from your audience's perspective. And that's where Jonathan comes in and handles that beautifully.
Thank you.
So how does a business owner or entrepreneur get started with you? First of all, we've thrown around a couple of different ideas of the businesses you like to work best with: influencers, small businesses, entrepreneurs. It's pretty broad.
It's pretty broad, and it's interesting because I've always been told as a photographer, stick to one specialty field. And for some people, it's like they're exceptional fashion photographers, for example. They'll make a name for themselves here and then quickly move on to LA or New York. And I consider that route myself. But for me, it's a big exploration process. So I started the typical weddings and portraits. Then I evolved into fashion, evolved into food, evolved in interiors and real estate. And so it's just been an umbrella. I'm like, well, why not be a lifestyle commercial photographer? So now I'm branching to kind of e-commerce. Like there's a brand here called Sportique.
I know Sportique. Matt's been on with us.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Exceptional brand. I love their quality. It's super comfortable clothes. And so it was just such a great process. And the way it came about, how I got introduced to them, and even the whole collaboration, the shoot, their production, their organization, it was just super smooth. And so I'm like, okay, this kind of genre of e-commerce and going more into that commercial photography realm, I'm like, I do that kind of stuff. I do the more smaller business stuff, or like looking at a business saying, hey, do you need headshots? Do you need website content? Do you need X, Y, and Z? So it's just, there's so many types of things I like to shoot now.
Well, and your experience is so broad, which is really great because you are the expert when it comes to the visual appeal. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was really fortunate the mentor I met too, because it was someone that was like kind of semi-retired, and it was just like, okay, I want to get back the knowledge I had. But it was knowledge that you really have to go through the process of being in LA or like a big market like New York and really, doing that hardcore, work and struggle and whatnot. And so I was just really fortunate to meet something like that. Give me a lot of like commercial studio knowledge that can tie into any different avenue of photography.
Love it. So how does a business owner get started with you? Is it just reaching out through the website and checking to see if there's an opportunity to connect? You had mentioned one-on-one earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it can be one-on-ones. I mean, I got a lot of people through my website, through social media too. I'm also even going through there, I'll find a business, I'll look at their page, and I won't say anything, but I'll look at their content like, they could use a little help.
Yeah.
So I'll just reach out, kind of introduce myself, always compliment the positive aspects of their brand, and then just kind of see if I can start a conversation. And that's where it starts. Meaning, if they'll meet me face to face, those are usually ones that work out the best. Those usually are more long-term relationships, are people that refer me to other people. I would say that 90% of my business, at least right now, has been through word-of-mouth referrals, and it's come through those more face-to-face meetings.
Well, people get to know you, right? They get to see what a solid guy you are and the experience and the knowledge you have, and equally important, how much you care about who they are and where they're headed in their business.
Yeah. And it's always nice when you have the opportunity to have that more personal approach and get to know people. I mean, I'm meeting more and more people are coming in this whole kind of like, let's not be transactional. Let's not expect something from this. Let me be interested genuinely in who you are and who your brand is, and then just see where the conversation goes from there.
Yeah, and that's Matt Altman for sure at Sportique.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. We're seeing more and more people here at the studio with that same approach as well. It's really, and there's some who that's kind of their talking point, but they don't really live and die by that. And then but the majority are, listen, really, we want to be conscious capitalists. How can we help everybody succeed? Back to your point about competition, competition is great. We joked earlier about some folks who are kind of doing what I'm doing since I've landed on the map here the last 2.5 years. And I really do take that as a compliment. And there's enough room for all of us. Yeah. We're all going to your point earlier, you show up in your jeans and boots. Okay, so we know that's you. That somebody who wants the guy in the tie, go find that guy. That's great. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, the market is definitely big enough that there is enough pie to go around, and Phoenix is a very little big city. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if you make a bad name for yourself, it's going to float around and it's going to catch you eventually. So it's really important to make sure that you really are who you say you are and represent what you really represent, because it's only a matter of time. And it's funny how that works out, but it is. So,
Talk just a little bit about Xpleo Media. Ryan, tell us, who are you and what do you guys do? And
so talking about kind of the pivot shift, like with the Blockbuster thing. So Xpleo's been around since 2006. I started it because my background was actually commercial real estate, and I did investment land. So I put together joint ventures, and as the market started to slow down, I had to figure out, what am I going to do to reinvent myself, because I knew the real estate market wasn't coming back. It's all I knew. It wasn't coming back for a while. And so my wife told me, hey, you've always enjoyed working with small businesses when I used to manage properties and understand what their marketing needs were and help them kind of come up with new ideas. I'm like, I'm going to try this. And I was the accidental entrepreneur. I had a client that I had leased some space to that was importing hand tools. And he's like, Ryan, I know you're an artsy fartsy guy. I'm kind of like Jonathan. I'm kind of one of those guys that just loves like art, like interior design, photography. And he's like, can you build me a website? I knew nothing about website design. This was pre-WordPress, pre-Joomla, Dreamweaver days. And I said, sure. So I taught myself to code in about a weekend, and I built my first website, kind of got a good taste of it. And I'm like, this could be something kind of cool. Back then, full-blown, recession. And I started helping build businesses with folks that were in industries that were being downsized. So mortgage brokers that were no longer able to stick with their business. Ex-CFOs, CMOs, CTOs that had been laid off. They were in their 60s. They were too young to retire, but they were a little bit too old to jump back in that position that a 30-something took. Right. And that's what Xpleo started as. In the last year, I've started pivoting Xpleo. We used to be the company that did the functions, the website, the brand, do the logo, do that kind of stuff. Now I'm moving more towards the marketing consultation side, that understanding what you're really trying to build, not just trying to do the functions behind it. So that's kind of where I'm moving. I'm starting now to work also in the leadership side. I've had the fortune to meet some great partners. John King, who wrote Tribal Leadership, Wayne Clancy, folks I'd love to have on your show. They're just amazing people. They have a lot of really solid leadership tools. And I'm finding that a lot of marketing is broken down at the leadership level. It's not being properly translated to build the business from the leadership side. So it's aligning leadership so they understand what their core values are. So now the brand can be built around that. So I'm moving more into the consultative role. That's where partnering up with Jonathan and finding an amazing photographer that I can rely on when someone says, hey, I need photography. I can go to Jonathan. I know the job's going to be handled. I don't have to try to handle it myself because, again, my goal is to remove myself from the functional side of doing these operations and be more of the consulting and the strategy side. So that's where I'm going.
I know that as business owners, we need to have someone like, well, both of you for that matter, in our sphere so that we can have someone take a look from the outside in. Oftentimes we're in the weeds of whatever we're working on and focusing on to obviously have the next sale and the next transaction, the next relationship that's long-term business. For me, myself, I get stuck in all of that, and I need to pop out and have someone say, okay, through the lens in which you see what I'm doing, what does this look like? And am I speaking to my mission and my purpose? And if not, how can you help guide me? Yeah, fantastic.
There's a lot of people, too, that are still learning as they go. And so it's huge that you're getting the consultation side, because I can't tell even how many clients I've had who've been retainer clients, or I'm doing pictures, and they're like, no, we don't need photography. We're going to cut that out of the business. But if you look at the whole model of their brand and what they're doing, they're still figuring things out. And even a guy I've worked with, Cynthia Sassy, the Fabulous Arizona, who's a great person. We've worked on some projects together, some clients, and she's like, without talking with businesses and saying, hey, what's going on? Where are you going with this? Like, a lot of times they'll just kind of figure all the stuff out themselves and not know what they're doing. And they learn by trial and error, but it's like they're affecting their business growth in the process. So you might as well bring in someone who can be like, specifically just focus on these, give yourself some baby steps on X, Y, and Z in your business, and you'll see some rapid growth just taking the time.
And you mentioned it earlier, being willing to ask questions and to ask for the help, right? Yeah. For all the conversations that we have here at Phoenix Business Radio, and we have so many great leaders that have come through and shared their stories, that seems to be the recurring thing. Folks who we see, gosh, they're a massive success. They have a multi-million-dollar, multi-billion-dollar business. And oftentimes it is in who they've chosen to bring into their close-knit sphere to guide, coach, consult, and work with, and be willing to say, hey, I don't know this yet, but I need to learn how. Show me how to get there, or even take it off my plate and do it for me.
And it's interesting because I call that now my family network. Yeah. I used to call it my sphere, but now it truly is my family network because they're the folks that I look at that not only do I do business with them, but if I'm broken down on the side of the road and I need to call a Roland Bennett or a Donna Jewett or Rita Hudgens, I got a whole list of them. I got about 50 of them. If I need to call them, they're going to stop what they're doing. They're going to show up. They're going to pick me up and make sure I'm taken care of. And I think that is when I talk to a lot of folks in business, that's actually a good starting point is to find out what is your family network. Because when I start a consultation, the first thing I do is I say, I want your asset list. And business owners are like, what's my asset list? And I'm like, do you have a house? You have a house. Do you have food on the table? Yes, I have food on the table. Okay. We're very blessed. So we have a lot we already have that we're starting with. And that asset list ends up being like, do you have a photographer? No, I don't. Well, that's one check. We need to get that on your asset list. And it's funny because when you start looking at your business of all the assets you have, and you start thinking through, like, for yourself, I have a studio, I have microphones, you start to realize, man, I have a lot of stuff I can leverage. What we typically do as business owners is we start out with a behind the eight ball mentality. So we start out in automatic survival mode. So we're like, well, that guy has all that stuff, so I'm not up to par with them. But what you have to really focus on is all the things you do have, because those are the things you leverage for your success.
And I love the piece around relationships, which is what we keep coming back to.
Yeah, and avoiding that comparison mentality. It's such a killer especially with inspiration as an entrepreneur. There's somebody I'm talking to, myself included, where I've had moments looking at things, and it's just like, you can't always look at social media. You can't look at people and say not everyone's an overnight success, and very few people are an overnight success. It's taking that time to grow and to really just be real with yourself, be real with your business, and from there, just kind of building great relationships and people that can help you in the process.
Yeah.
Love it. What have I not thought to ask that you feel for either of your businesses is important for our listeners to know about you and who you represent? Anything else you want to?
How can we help you?
I like that. Well, we talked about it a little bit. I feel like was his name Peter? I'm shocked that I don't know this Peter, so I would love an introduction to Peter, because you mentioned that he's just this great connector, and I feel like I'm that too, so I would love an introduction to Peter.
His email introductions are exceptional. He just built, Ryan too, like they build this very personal, focusing on the individual traits and characteristics of the person.
I've had those emails from Ryan, and I feel like I do the same. I'm not quite as quick to respond, but what can you do for me? Just continue to sing our praises. Really, for us, we just want to be the storyteller, right? And it's not my story, it's your story. I want to hear what you have to say about yourself as a professional, yourself as a leader in the industry, and this provider of a service or this business that you have. And that's our wreath on the door. It's an opportunity for you to tell your story and then go out and take that content, right? It'll be a podcast after this live broadcast. Yeah. And please go do something. Actually, that's my answer. Go do something with the content that you've had after spending some time with us here.
But I want to know one thing, Karen, because we talked about this before the podcast started, but you're very humble in the sense that you don't talk about your business. So for you, who are you looking to connect with for your business? Because obviously for me, it's consulting opportunities and marketing. For Jonathan, it's that storytelling and being able to develop a visual imagery for them. What are you looking for?
So I think Jonathan said this earlier for himself as well. It's not a specific industry. For me, it's very broad. We want to be the B2B broadcast and podcast publication house for a lot of different industries. The wreath on our door are these guest experiences. Just come and tell your story. But the revenue for us and for me is having sponsors do their own shows and series here. So I just would love to have more people who are interested in how would a podcast work for me in my business, and why would I want to do it at a studio location working with Business RadioX versus in my home office or my garage or kitchen or whatever it is. I'm not making fun of that. I'm not making light of it, because a lot of people are wildly successful with that process, but what we do is different. So introductions to folks who have businesses and enterprises that have anywhere between, $10,000 product or service that they're offering, those kinds of businesses, we can really help them accelerate the relationships with the right people that they want to do business with. So that's pretty broad, but that's our target audience. Yeah. Who is making massive amounts of change in their industry and the communities that they serve, and let's have them come and be part of our studio so that we can build a podcast around the people that they want to meet.
I'll tell you, this is my third time here, and you do an exceptional job, and it's a really neat experience.
I appreciate it. So this is I don't know how many careers in this is for me, but this is a new version of me. I've pivoted. Anybody who's been following me on social media for a while knows that I've pivoted a lot. But I'm also, part of my story is I'm not bashful about that. I just do it right in front of everybody. And the neatest compliment is the one that you've just shared. I simply love listening to people, and I really want to hear like your heart and your mind and how that all comes together on behalf of the people that you serve. So for folks who've been doing a lot of interviews over the years, when their PR person follows up with me afterwards and says, "Oh my gosh, so-and-so fell in love with you. They said you were the best interviewee they've had." That's huge for me, because I'm just being Karen. And so thank you.
You're very natural behind the mic, and it's just, you can tell it's very natural for you. You want to know people's story, and that's it's very warm and welcoming, where it's not that standoffish, you're better than the guest kind of thing. You do just an exceptional job.
And it ties in perfectly to our whole conversation around that whole relational based mentality and approach to things. I mean, this is my first interview on a radio, so of course I was a little nervous getting into it.
Oh, you're great.
Yeah. And so I like the whole just kind of natural approach to things. It's very comfortable. It's very laid back, and there's a good meaning, a good message to things that we're talking about that I think can benefit a lot of people. Talk to so many entrepreneurs and people going through different things in the Valley, and I just think there's this kind of bigger awareness going on between how people want to relate to one another, grow their businesses, be real, be authentic. And of course, there's a bigger global consciousness of what's going on in the economy. And so people are coming back to this kind of local support for each other and for businesses, and just how that can kind of spread as a bigger impact. So it's kind of cool.
So there's two organizations that I'm deeply ingrained and work with. One is Conscious Capitalism of Arizona, and they are one of my location sponsors along with Mac 6. And everything that we've been talking about is very conscious capitalism related. I know there's a couple of events coming up this month, I think, where we're going to bring our community together, and it's a nonprofit, and it's really just around everything we've talked about, leadership, and how do we, help give a hand up to somebody or reach across with a competitor and help them find those connections that they need. So would love to get you guys connected with Conscious Capitalism. And of course, Local First Arizona. I don't know if either of you do any work with Local First.
I know of Local First, but
I'm for both of you, because everything that we're talking about is really around helping each other succeed. And at least for our Arizona businesses, Local First focuses on just that. How do we keep the money here? Yeah. How do we grow and succeed as businesses so that people want to stay here and have their families grow up here, in addition to new people coming in and being part of Arizona instead of hiring out, and just a phenomenal organization. So I'll make sure I give you guys some connections with that afterwards.
That'd be great, Karen.
Absolutely. So let's round out the segment by letting our listeners know how they can find you and what that first step is. I know we said it earlier on, but let's repeat that. And where out in the World Wide Web would we find you? Jonathan, you want to start for us?
Yeah. So on my website is jonathanpuente.com. It's Jonathan, Jon. That's always a common question. And then my last name is Puente. And then
Excellent.
Also my Instagram handle is Jonathan Puente Photo.
So Instagram and on the website as well. And then just probably poke around. I think we do that. We kind of go looking, kicking tires and see, and then start following you on Instagram. But it's also as easy as just sending you an email through your website that just says, hey, let's have a conversation and let's talk a little bit about what I'm doing and where you can help me.
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for trusting us with your story today.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And Ryan, Xpleo Media, where do we find you?
So you can find me on my website. I know Xpleo is a unique name, but it's spelled Xpleo Media.com. And you can email me at ryan@xpleomedia.com. That's RYAN. But actually, the best way to reach me is my cell phone. I actually like to talk to people. And that is 602-694-1093. I love to do the first session as a half hour kind of meet and greet and just kind of philosophize and talk about where alignments might be to see if it's a good opportunity for us to work together. So it's no cost. Just I love to meet people and find out their story. So that's the best starting point, is to have that meeting and see where things go. You can also find me on LinkedIn. If you look up Ryan Parker, you can find me there. I'm on Instagram as well. I don't use it as much as I should. And that's just /Xpleo Media. And and then you can find me on Facebook as Xpleo Media as well. So if you look me up under that, you'll find me somewhere.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you both again for sharing your time with us. You've been listening to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studio inside Mac 6 and the Conscious Capitalism studio. Some media leans left, some lean right, and we lean business. Until next time, I'm Karen Nowicki.